Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Seed Talk 2020. I'm Lori Hayes, the Executive Director for the Saskatchewan Seed Growers Association, and we're glad that you could join us this morning. This session is going to be recorded. I will be stopping the recording in between each session so they can be stored separately. And just a few notes to start. Everybody will be on mute during the presentations and unmuted for the question and answer sessions. During those sessions, please mute your phone or computer, and you can press *6 on most phones to stay on mute, and you can mute yourself again by pressing *6 again. If there's an echo, that means someone's on both their phone and computer. So when you logged on, there was a participant ID. So if you press pound and that participant ID number and pound on your phone, then your computer audio will be disconnected and there shouldn't be any more. This meeting is going to be recorded. So there's two ways to ask questions. One is a chat, so you can submit a question at any time during the session. And the other one is raise hand, and it shows a little hand raised, and it'll be at the bottom of the page. So in order to chat, this will show up down at the bottom. So you hit chat, type in your question, and then we'll save them for the Q&A. So you don't need to wait till the end if you want to type it in so you don't forget, or whatever works for you. And if you're on a mobile device, it's down, you've got to tap your screen, and down at the bottom it says participants, and then further down it says chat. For raising your hand, it's again at the bottom, and this is what it looks like. Then I will see that your hand is raised, and then I'll get to you, and this is during the question and answer, and then you can put it down when you're done. And with that participant number, you'll need to type that in. You'll just have to follow your prompts. All right, so our first speaker this morning, or the first session, is Seed Growing 101. What every new and experienced seed grower and their team needs to know. So we're going to start with Brianna Chouinard. She's the manager of certification for CSGA. And then Alyssa Chalmers will give a little bit of an update from an LSCI's perspective. And then Barry Reisner will give you some tips and tricks from his experience. And that will be followed by Roy Van Wyk, who's the executive director for the Canadian Seed Institute. And he's going to talk about the other half, the registered seed establishment component. And then Lyndon Olson will give some tips and tricks from his perspective as an experienced grower. Okay, Brianna, I will stop sharing and you can take control of the screen.
Thanks, Larry. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, so I'm going to be presenting an overview of the first part of seed certification in Canada, which is actually seed crop certification. And I do have a lot of ground to cover, and I'm sure there will be lots of questions. So I do have some question breaks built in, but if I can't get to your questions, know that you can contact me at the office at any time. We're here to help. Okay, so I'll start with an overview of CSGA, our CFIA partners and international partners as well, and an overview of the seed certification process. And then we will talk about some of the elements that are specific to seed crop certification. So CSGA was established in 1904. We are designated in the Seeds Act as the national association responsible for prescribing varietal purity standards through our Circular 6, and for certifying all agricultural seed crops except for potatoes. In 2019, this meant that we certified 2,256 different varieties over 1.3 million acres. In Saskatchewan, that's represented by about 330,000 acres. We work very closely with CFIA through the seed section in Ottawa, which oversees the program delivery for certification, and CFIA labs who do variety verification testing, and occasionally with CFIA inspection staff where there are issues noticed in season that need some attention. All inspection services are authorized and audited by CFIA, and seed crop inspectors are trained by CFIA, and the work is also overseen through the check inspection program. This means that a percentage of each inspector's inspections are duplicated by a CFIA inspector, then compares the two reports and identifies any discrepancies to evaluate the performance of that inspector. I also want to highlight the CFIA's variety verification program, which is a critical health check of the pedigreed seed system. So to complete the certification of select and probation plots, growers are required to submit a sample of the cleaned, untreated, harvested seed to CFIA. And every year, CFIA plants almost 2,000 of these samples alongside reference samples of those varieties to evaluate the performance of the seed system, and also so that they can provide in-season advice to CSGA where potential issues are found. We do have a few international partners, so we participate in the OECD seed schemes and also in AOSCA to ensure that our standards align with international standards, and also to provide advice for the development and modification of those international standards. So what is certified seed? Certified seed is seed produced under stringent field production requirements set by CSGA and is subsequently processed, sampled, tested, graded, and labeled as specified by the seeds regulations. The field and seed quality standards guarantee off-types, weeds, and other crop kinds are kept to a minimum to ensure the varietal purity of the seed and to maintain yield, quality, disease resistance, and distinguishing characteristics of a variety. Another part of certification is variety verification, which is done through the inspector comparing the variety in the field to what is described in the variety description. Here's a flow chart from the CSGA website that illustrates all of the steps that are involved in pedigreed seed production, from variety development all the way through to end use. These are those activities that are directly involved in seed crop certification. I should mention that step 4, planting equipment sanitization of planting equipment, isn't assessed during the certification process, but the advice is always to clean all of your equipment and clean it again to make sure that all of the work and the cost that you put into producing high quality pedigreed seed isn't lost before you even start. Okay, so now I'm going to flip to our website, seedgrowers.ca. I'll just quickly go through some of the key tools here. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but just in case, the top bar here has a login button. When you click on it, it takes you to our members area. If you don't remember your password, you can use the forgot login button, or you can contact the office and we'll help you out. If you're a new grower, or if you're wanting to add a grower to your account, they'll need to fill out the new grower form, which can be found here, and that will set them up with an account number and a password. Once you have those two pieces of information, you can log in. The crop history tab is the landing page, and that shows you the current status of all of the applications that you have in the system. Apply Now tab is where you can find your membership form and your application for seed crop certification. The Forms tab has all of the electronic forms that you might need. I'd like to highlight the seed tag upload tool and the map upload tool. Every field does need a map, so you can use this tool to provide a map if one wasn't attached to the application form directly. We don't need a tag for every field, but if the seed was produced outside of Canada, we do need a tag. So you can use the seed tag upload tool here if we press to see a copy of that. And also the Form 101, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. On the payment tab, you can see the status of all of your invoices, and you can also pay online. For those of you who send checks to the office, we are considered an essential service, and so our office is still open, but if you can use the electronic pay now button, that would be preferable. Variety description tab, you can see all the variety descriptions for the variety you're producing, and some of these tabs here are just for testing purposes, and so you won't necessarily log in. When you're preparing for the upcoming crop year, the first thing we recommend is that growers check out the application support document, which can be found on the application for seed crop certification page right here. This is updated every year and describes all of the changes to the seed certification process, the applicable application deadline dates, the current fee schedule, and the link to the list of changes to Circular 6. And for 2020, there is a section on changes to our membership structure, which I'll describe in just a little bit. This document is the best reference to refresh yourself on the current requirements for seed crop certification. So most of what I'm presenting today is either in here or in Circular 6. Those are the two touchstones, so really be familiar with those two pieces of documentation. at the top of the checklist is, at the top of the document is a checklist, which we will use to go through the next part of the presentation. So the first thing we do is read the support document, which we can say that we've done. And then the next part is to review the 2020 version of Circular 6. So there is a link here that takes you directly to that document or to the 2020 list of changes. I'm just going to skip ahead. So Circular 6 describes regulations and procedures for pedigreed seed crop production. The 2020 version has been modernized and the content has been rearranged, but nothing has been changed that isn't included in that 2020 list of changes. So every pedigree crop that's produced must meet these certification requirements for that crop client and class as published in Circular 6. So I'll just take you through some of the reformatting changes. Section 1 still has general requirements for crop production, but it's now divided into parts. So the first part is the general requirements for all pedigreed seed crops. And like I said, nothing has been changed, but it has been rearranged. And every time I look at this, even I see things that I had forgotten about or didn't know about. So just have a look through here every year. Growers producing selector foundation plots will need to look at part 2 in addition to part 1, and those growers who are looking to produce a probation plot or who are currently producing probation plots would look at part 3 in addition to part 1. Every section after the first section has been rearranged. So instead of section 2 containing all of the standards for cereals on a few pages, the section is now a series of crop-specific pages where each set of pages has information that's only relevant for the production of that crop kind. So if a grower is producing registered barley, they would grab the barley pages. So this is the top half of the first page of the barley page. And then they would grab part 1 of section 1, and they would have everything that they need for production of barley. The crop kinds present in each section has not changed. So section 2 is still for fields of cereal crops. Section 3 is still for pulses, etc. And for plot production, those requirements are still in section 12, but again, divided by crop-specific pages. So the next step is to arrange inspections with an authorized seed crop inspection service. If we go back to our web page, Seed Growers, if we click on Seed Grower Resources, we can contact, there's a tool here to contact an inspection service. I also want to point out the Seed Grower FAQ that's here. There might be a question there that you didn't know you had and an answer. It's always a good resource. But if we're looking for an inspection service, we would go to this link and then select Saskatchewan and pretend we're not producing a plot of barley. And then this will bring up a list of all the inspection services that are operating in Saskatchewan. Service providers are obligated to provide service to anyone in their area, so all of Saskatchewan, until the service provider has performed a minimum number of inspections. But the pricing will vary depending on their fee structure and whether they have an inspector in your area. So it helps to call around until you develop with a relationship with the seed crop inspection service. Once you've done that, the next step is to submit a CSJ membership application renewal form. Before you can submit any applications, you do have to submit this membership renewal form. And it gives the member a chance to review your contact information, the account members, adjust authorizations, and provide updates. This is the only form that every member must complete every year, and it has to be completed by the member. If you don't want to be involved in paperwork after this point, and if you have a third party that's willing to do the work for you, then this membership form is all that you have to do. On the membership form, you can indicate whether you are authorizing a third party. So the third party does have to have a CSGA account. And once they're authorized, they can submit applications for seed crop certification on your behalf using the third-party authorized application form. And they can also address any documentation issues or additional certification requirements. I did mention earlier that the membership structure has been changed for 2020. So previously for group accounts, every member on the account would have been charged a $200 fee for CSJ membership. In 2020, only the first member on an account is charged an increased $240 fee, but every additional member is only charged $25. This is a revenue neutral change that was implemented to encourage more growers to think about their succession plan. Only the growers named on the account and on the final crop certificate are credited with those years of production, which are required if the grower is wanting to start their probation period to become a select grower or to produce foundation class seed. So for 2020, we're recommending that all growers please look at your business and start thinking about your succession plan. The last step is to apply for seed crop certification. But you have to know what you're going to plant and where you're going to plant before you can do that. So we do have on our website, if you're looking for pedigreed seed, the seed locator tool that's found here. CSGA maintains a list of all of the pedigreed seed that's available for sale. This information is also given to the branches, which is used to populate their seed guides. So if we're looking to produce a Seed Connect barley, you would hit search. The only information that's presented here is the variety, the pedigreed class of the seed that's available, and the contact information for the crop certificate holder. No information regarding the agronomic or quality traits of the variety are provided here, or CBD content in the case of hemp. So any pedigreed seed you produce will be represented here at the end of the year, although you can choose what contact information to provide. If you have seed from 2 years previous or older that you would like to include on this list, you can use the notice of carryover seed that's found here. After you have your seed, the next thing is to figure out where you're going to put it. So you have to look at what the land produced in the previous year or in the previous years, depending on the land use requirements for that crop kind and class. And we'll talk about land use requirements a little bit, but I'll say here that if you're ever unsure about the land eligibility, please submit a Form 101, which is also found on the Forms tab of the members area. It's better to know early and to get a response from CSGA and change your seeding plans if you need to, rather than going ahead and hoping for the best. In addition to the land use history, you also have to consider the borders of your field. So in the application support document, there's a link to our field definition document. If the inspector comes out and finds that your field doesn't meet the CSGA definition here, they can request that the field is split into smaller fields that do meet the definition, and they might go ahead and do that right away and do the inspections, or they might have to come back and do a re-inspection. So better to avoid the re-inspection and make sure that your field meets the definition of a field. So any large physical barriers that restrict access to adjacent fields would be considered the borders of your field, and this includes public roads. If you have a slough or a ditch through your field, it may not be considered a large physical barrier if you can get your equipment through there. But the inspector will sort of make that determination when they come out. Okay, so now that we have all the pieces that we need for our application, we can go ahead and put that in. Each field and plot must have its own application because each field and plot will have its own inspection. Each application must have a map, so if you don't have it at the time of application, you can always use that map upload tool and submit it following the application. And there are application dates depending on the crop kind. There's a 2-week grace period following each of these application dates where there's no penalty and we'll still accept the application. But after that 2 weeks is up, there are penalties that start to accrue and they increase over time. So do try to get your applications in at the proper time. Once the application is completed and submitted to the SGA, it's present, it's assigned a sequence number and it's included on the crop history tab. So on the very left-hand side of every row is a little arrow. If you click that, it opens up some expanded information about your field. You can see a copy of the application, of any crop reports that are submitted, support documentation. Once the crop certificate is issued, you'll be able to see a copy of the crop certificate here. And any questions that CSGA has about the field will also be here. If you realize after you have sent your application that there was an error on it, you can use the modify application button to change certain variables on your application. Some variables you can't change, like the variety. So if you do need to make any of those changes, just contact the office. Once the inspection has occurred, you won't have access to this modification form and you'll have to send a letter to the office. Okay, so after all of the paperwork is done, the applications have been forwarded to CSGA. There's nothing to do but wait for the crop inspection to occur. So I do have a short question break here. If you have a question, maybe you can use you'll have to unmute your mic or we can use the chat function. Do all listed members still have voting rights? I
Oh well, I'm going to flatten one of these lights up.
agree that is the case.
Hi, Brianna.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I didn't realize that.
That's all right. Okay, for the people that want to ask a question, can you use the hand up and then I'll go straight to you, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. And there was one question in the chat, and the question was, do all listed members still have voting rights?
That's a great question. And you know, I should know the answer, but off the top of my head, I don't. I see that Jonathan and Roy are here. Do one of you have the answer to that?
Well, in CSGA currently, yes, every member has their vote. So, you know, when we're talking what is currently in place, yes, every member has a vote.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any other questions for Brianna?
But with the new app. So you're asking if each member who's on a group account has a vote. That you're...
Yeah, so the further question is, but with the new applications going forward, and I think that Jonathan said yes, at least for this current year.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, let's not confuse what's currently in place with CSGA and then the discussions we're having with you know, for the NSO. So yeah, currently, if you're wanting to grow seed and you put your application in, you become a member this year, and we carry on business as usual.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm just going to jump ahead to the next section.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so inspectors will come out when the crop is at a stage of maturity and where varietal impurities are best visible. Each crop has this stage defined in Circular 6, if you're curious about that. Inspectors conduct their inspection according to CFIA's specific work instructions, which are available on the CFIA's website. They're not necessary for you to read, but some people like to know that, so it is available there if you're curious. To know what the inspector will be examining and what CSGA will be considering in order to make a certification decision, I'm going to go through the main parts of a crop inspection, so just these general categories here. So the first thing we're going to look at is the eligibility of the parent seed and the grower's credentials. So depending on the seed class planted, only certain classes can be harvested. Furthermore, each crop kind may only be pedigreed as certain classes depending on the biology of the crop. So for section 2 and 3 crops, with the exception of field beans, which may or may not have a registered class, they fall under this first column here. Breeder seed does not have a generational limit. Breeders can produce breeder seed from breeder seed as many times as they like. But select seed can only be multiplied for 5 generations or multiplications, after which point it's only eligible to produce foundation seed. So these first 2 classes here above the line can only be produced in plots by accredited growers. So breeders produce breeder seed, select growers produce select seed. These are the unofficial classes, and so seed tags for them are available through CSGA. The 3 classes below the line are the 3 official classes, foundation, registered, and certified, and tags for these classes can be obtained through CFIA. Foundation, registered, and certified seed is produced in fields, not plots, and with each generation moves down a class. So breeder select seed is planted to produce foundation, foundation seed is planted to produce registered, registered is planted to produce certified. If breeder or select seed is planted in the field, and if the grower is either a select grower or on probation, they can harvest foundation seed. If a new grower plants breed or select seed or foundation seed, the highest class they can harvest is registered. Certified seed, if it's planted, is not eligible to produce another generation of pedigree seed. Here are the tags that are seen most often, in addition to the bulk tags for foundation and registered seed. There's the white foundation seed tag and the purple registered tag. If you receive a tag for seed from another grower, there must be a lot number here, and that lot number must be included on your application for seed crop certificate. Seed produced outside of Canada will either be on an OECD tag if it's from an OECD member agency, or on one of the state-based agency tags if it's from the States, or it could be on the white interagency tag. CSGA will need to see a copy of the tag, like I said earlier, if the seed's produced outside of Canada. So you can attach it to your application form or use the tag upload form. As part of the inspection, the inspector will be asking to see a copy of the tags that were attached to the seed container, so be sure that you retain those tags and labels. If seed is produced in Canada, it must have a valid crop certificate number. And looking at the crop certificate number, you can tell certain things about that seed. So the first 2 digits are the year that the crop was produced. So this seed was produced in 2019. The next 7 digits are the grower number, but the first 2 digits indicate where the seed was produced. So for all of you in Saskatchewan, and these should start with 70. The next 5 digits don't. That's just a number that's assigned by CSGA. The third last digit is maybe the most important digit because that tells you what class the seed is. So in this case, we have a 1, which indicates that this is foundation seed. If it was a 2, it would be registered. 4 for certified. You may see an F, an R, or a C there, which means that even though the seed was certified as a certain class, it was demoted for whatever reason during grading, and so it's now considered either F for foundation, R for registered, or C for certified. The last 2 digits are just randomly assigned, so those numbers don't tell you very much. Okay, so the next step is to look at land use history. So Circular 6 has very specific land use requirements for each crop kind and class. The land use requirements are written to describe what cannot be on the land in the previous years, rather than what could have been. And that's because there's a very much smaller list of things that could not have been, as opposed to trying to list out all of the possible crop rotations that people might have. So here is an example of the land use requirements for foundation registered and certified production of barley. So if we've planted foundation seed and we're hoping to produce registered, we would look at this one down here for registered. And we would go through each of the points to make sure that our land use meets what's provided here in Circular 6. These requirements are established to limit the potential for volunteers from other crop kinds and weeds, which would impact the mechanical purity of the crop, or from volunteers of the same crop kind that might have been in those crops in the previous year, which would impact the varietal purity of the current crop. So for registered barley, the first point is that the previous year must not have been a non-pedigreed cereal, where non-pedigreed means not inspected. Even if the crop in the previous year had been planted with pedigreed seed, if it was not inspected, the land is considered to have produced a non-pedigreed crop. Part of the reason is that there could have been barley in that non-pedigreed cereal that could volunteer to contaminate the inspected crop, and without an inspection, there's no official record to say otherwise. If the grower requests a land use inspection, if they had requested a land use inspection in the previous year, provided it's not the same crop kind being grown in the current year, the SGA would count that previous year as an official record, and the land use would meet the standards of Circular 6, even though no crop certificate was issued. So if I've planted certified wheat one year and I know I want to plant a barley next year, even though that's maybe not the best idea, I could have an inspector come out and do a land use inspection on that non-pedigreed wheat, and then CSGA would consider the land to have produced a pedigreed wheat, even though no crop certificate was issued, and then this first criteria would be met. The second point says that the land must not have produced a crop of a different variety of barley in the previous year, and that's just to prevent any volunteers from cropping up in the current crop and impacting the varietal purity of our crop. The third point has a conditional clause in it. So if in the current year we had a non-pedigreed crop of bean, canary seed, then we would look to the year prior to that to see if there was a different variety of barley or a non-pedigreed crop of barley. If we had a non-pedigreed soybean in the previous year, but the year prior had a non-pedigreed wheat, there would be no issue, and this wouldn't kick in. if we had a pedigreed soybean in the previous year, then we wouldn't, then this first criteria wouldn't kick in, and then it wouldn't matter what was there in the previous, in the 2 years prior. Wheat land use requirements are a little bit more complex as it is divided by spring and winter production. If you are producing durum, please know that it has its own series of pages and they are very different from these ones. So just be sure that you're looking at the proper pages. For foundation production of spring wheat, it can look at the 3rd year prior, and it will look at the 2 years prior regardless of what was there. There's no conditional clause. So just be careful with that one. And I will say, if you're ever uncertain as to whether your land use is permitted again, please submit a Form 101 or contact the office. We are more than happy to help you figure it out. For forages, I don't know if any of you produce forages, but the land use requirements are a little bit different because forages are perennial crops that can be renewed from year to year. So in the 1st year of application, all we're looking for are the 2 years prior to the year of seeding. So if this certified crop was seeded in 2020, then most likely the first inspected year would be 2021, but we would be looking for the land use history for 2019 and 2018 because those are the 2 years prior to seeding. Okay, the next step is isolation distances. So isolation distances in Circular 6 fall into 2 broad categories, which are smaller isolations for self-pollinating crops and larger isolations for cross-pollinating crops. The reason the isolations for cross-pollinated crops are so different is that because depending on the method of pollination and the weight of the pollen can actually go anywhere from 30 meters up to 5 kilometers away from the crop. So we want to make sure if you're producing a crop that's open pollinated, that you're looking at the isolation standards for that crop. Isolations must be in place at the time of inspection, so it's a good idea to mow things down around inspection time so that your inspector has a really good view of the field and won't request a re-inspection. The inspector walks the field in a pattern and touches on each of the 4 sides of the field to check and describe the isolations, which they submit to CSGA on their report. So here are the isolations for wheat for foundation registered and certified production. If the adjacent field is the same variety and is also inspected for pedigreed status, although not necessarily for the same pedigreed status, only 1 meter is required. You can also put up stakes to separate the 2 fields, but they can't be more than 100 meters apart and they have to clearly define the borders of the field at the time of inspection. If they're not there, the inspector won't know where the field ends and they may have to come back out. 3 meters of isolation are required between different varieties of the same crop kind, so different varieties of wheat or non-pedigreed wheat, and that's just to maintain the varietal purity of the inspected crop. There is only 2 meters required for mechanical purity isolation between the inspected crop and other crop kinds which are difficult to separate. So for in this case wheat, that would be barley, buckwheat, durum, oat, rye, and triticale. You can also, if you don't have 2 meters, if there's a physical barrier in between, such as a fence, so if there's a fence separating our wheat from the barley crop, you don't need 2 meters, but the inspector is still going to be looking 3 meters away from the field to assess the varietal purity. So the physical barrier is only for mechanical purity separation. It does not apply to varietal purity separation. If there isn't a prescribed isolation here, then no isolation is required. So if our wheat field was right next to a field of corn or canola or soybeans, there's no issue with that. The inspector, again, will still look 3 meters away from the crop just to make sure that there's no sources of mechanical or varietal impurities, but no isolation would be, correction would be required. Like I said, for cross-pollinating crops, the isolation distances can be quite large. So for rye, which is in section 2, 300 meters is required between different varieties of rye or non-pedigreed rye. You can also see that for crop planted with certified seed of the same variety, only 3 meters is required. So that certified seed doesn't have to be inspected, but CSGA does have to know that that seed was certified. So we will need the crop certificate number for the adjacent field. And also that certified seed has to be free for 300 meters from non-pedigreed or other varieties of rye. The other crop in section 2 that it's open pollinated is off the top of my head. buckwheat. And in section 3, it's faba beans. So if you're planting rye, buckwheat, or faba beans, just be aware there are increased isolation distances. So as the inspector is walking the field and checking the isolations, they're also stopping 6 times within the field to make counts to assess the varietal and mechanical purity of the crop. For fields of section 2 and 3 crops, each count area encompasses approximately 10,000 plants. So by the time the inspection is complete, the inspector has evaluated 60,000 plants. In addition to the count areas, the inspectors will report any issues that they notice outside of counts, such as patches of contamination. Anything that doesn't look like the norm of the variety is reported by the inspector. Variety descriptions can sometimes contain variants, which are plants that don't look like the norm of the variety, but which are stable within the variety and occur at predictable levels. When CSGA appraises the inspection report, we look at the variety description and check for variants that match what the inspector has reported. Anything that doesn't match or that is in excess of what is expected in the variety with the tolerance applied is considered an off type and can affect the varietal purity of the crop. Mechanical purity is an evaluation of other crop kinds or weeds that have seeds that are difficult to separate from those of the inspected crop. So if the crop is difficult to separate, there will be a standard for it in Circular 6. If it's a weed that's difficult to separate, it will be included in the CFI specific work instructions, which is not easily, you know, we're trying to bring it into Circular 6, but we haven't done that yet. So just be aware that they are in the specific work instructions. It doesn't happen very often. In season, please look at your crop periodically and assess its varietal and mechanical purity. You can correct any issues by roguing or isolating sections of the crop that are heavily contaminated, but it has to be done before the inspection occurs. This is especially important in the case of plots where the purity criteria are quite strict. So if we're producing a crop of barley for Foundation Registered or Certified production, we would look to the barley pages and we would find the standards for purity. The varietal purity standards are very strict for higher classes, so for Foundation it's only 1, and they loosen through the generations as off-types will generally increase from year to year in the population. Notice that these standards are written to be out of 10,000 plants, so what we're considering is the average of all of the off-types found over the inspector's 6 counts. So if the field is 1 plant over in one of those counts, which would mean that the average would be 1.17, and if we were looking to produce Foundation seed, at 1.17, we would be over the standard for varietal purity and Foundation, but we'd be less than registered. So CSGA would demote the field to registered and put a note on the crop certificate. But you'd still get a pedigreed status. For certified, it's 8. If the field has an off-types in excess of 8, then CSGA will not certify the field. The mechanical purity standards for cereals are some of the most complex standards, and even after 5 years, I have not even tried to memorize this. So please refer to Circular 6 if you're concerned that you do have a contaminant that's present. Notice that the certified standards are quite stringent. So for a certified field of barley, we're only allowed 2 plants of durum, which is much stricter than the varietal purity standards, and this is something that we are looking at. Like the isolation standards, if there's no standard for varietal purity listed in Circular 6, then there's no problem. So if there's corn in our barley field, the inspector probably won't report it to CSGA, and CSGA wouldn't take action on it anyway, unless the corn was so dense that the inspector was not able to do their inspection. In addition to the purity, looking for other crop kinds and off-types, the inspector is also looking for weeds. So the inspector will be looking for prohibited noxious weeds, which are listed in the weed seeds order. If they find one, the CSGA will not certify the field, and CFIA will likely follow up to contain the weed. These cases are very rare, and I wouldn't worry about it. The reason they're prohibited noxious is because they aren't found. The inspector will also look at the general frequency of weeds, and if the weeds are dense enough that the inspector can't do their inspection, CSGA will not certify the field. The most common weeds of concern are cleavers in wild mustard and canola crops, and wild oats and oats. In 2019, you may have noticed that CSGA began to certify oat fields with high levels of wild oats, so long as the inspector is able to conduct their inspection. This is not the case in fields in Quebec and the Maritimes, where wild oats are still managed. But anywhere west of Quebec, it doesn't matter how many wild oats that are in there, as long as the inspector is able to do their inspections, the CSGA will certify the field. And the reason we were able to do this is due to our pilot project where we gathered data to show that the wild oats could be cleaned out. Once the inspector completes the report and has it approved by the lead inspector, the report is sent to CSGA for appraisal, and depending on whether there were any issues with the field, the grower will either receive a crop certificate for the field or their assignee if they had one, or they'll get a letter from us asking for more information or for an isolation correction. Crop certificates are printed once a week, but as soon as the crop certificate is authorized, the crop certificate number will be visible in the member's area. Letters from CSGA are sent to the email on the grower's account, and we can ask for land use information, for additional certification forms, sometimes for confirmation that a minor contaminant was removed. So it's important to keep your contact information up to date to ensure that you're receiving emails from CSGA. You can also look on the crop history tab. Any letters that we will send to you will also have a corresponding code here, so you can see any outstanding issues and keep track of them that way if you like. I should say that check inspections can occur either before or after your inspection service inspector's inspection. So if you see an inspector in the field, do not assume that it was the inspector from the inspection service. Before harvesting a field, CSGA always recommends checking the certification status of the field in the crop history tab of the members area to ensure that the inspection has been appraised and that there are no reinspection requirements or any other things that might require a reinspection. CSGA will not certify a field that was not inspected and found to meet the requirements of Circular 6. Please do not harvest without checking the members area. Following the inspection, the inspector may warn the grower of a potential issue and direct them to contact CSGA for more information. The grower should wait for that isolation correction from CSGA and contact CSGA if you don't receive one, as we may determine that no isolation correction was required, or we may even ask for something different than what the inspector had suggested might be the case. This is very important in the case of forages where the isolation corrections can be very complicated. Once the isolation has been corrected, a reinspection will be required. We don't recognize isolation corrections that are not verified by the inspector. When you get your crop certificate, please look it over carefully. If your field was demoted to a lower class, there will be a reason for the demotion printed on the crop certificate. And if the crop is still standing, you have the opportunity to address the issue and have the field re-inspected. For example, if you are producing a whole 120 acres of foundation seed, but it's demoted to certified for vital purity issues, and you really want some registered seed, you can isolate the best portion of the field and clean it up, or not. You can just have it re-inspected as it is, and that portion might be eligible for a higher class. Growers can request a re-inspection if they've taken any corrective actions on the crop to address a demotion or warning on the crop certificate in order to receive an amended crop certificate. I will also say that there are some crop kinds that have additional certification requirements, and the most common of this are the midge-wheat tolerant blends. So for these crop kinds, after you've harvested this field, and this is one case where you do have to harvest the field first before the crop certificate is issued, you do have to send a sample to a lab that is recognized by CSGA for conducting an assessment of that specific varietal blend. And once you have that test result, you have to attach it to a Form 182, which can be found on the Forms tab of the members area. Okay, so that was a pile of information. I'll maybe just take a few questions. Okay, so I see there's a question from Kathy. She says, my midge tolerant field passed inspection, but once harvested, the germination failed. I cannot use it for seal. Do I still need to get the test done? If you don't need a crop certificate, then no, you don't still need to get the test done, but you can let us know and we'll just mark the field as certificate not required so that it's not outstanding in the system.
Thanks, Brianna. Anybody else have any questions? Again, you can use the raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself at this point to ask a question.
So Kathy, I just noticed the other half of your question. Even though that field won't have a crop certificate, it will have been inspected. So I wouldn't put the same, you could put the same crop kind in there because it does have, it will have an assessment of the varietal purity, and it would have past, so long as there weren't any bridal period issues, it would have received that specific class. So, you know, even though the germination wasn't great, on your application for seed crop certification, just write the sequence number for the previous year rather than the crop certificate number so that we can look that up. Are there any special cropping requirements for select plots? Yes, there are. I am going to talk about select and probation plot production after this, but I wasn't really going to dive into the land use requirements and the isolation requirements. They are more strict for select plot production. So do look at those things in section 12. Generally, for select plots, there aren't conditional statements. So for barley plot production, it will look at the 2 previous years, regardless of what was there in the previous year. For wheat, for spring wheat, it looks at the 3 years. So just be aware of that as well.
All right. Any other questions? I don't see any hands raised in the participant list.
Okay, if you do come up with any questions after this, like I said, send me an email, give me a call. We're more than happy to help. We just want to make sure that everything goes smoothly for you.
And yeah, and there'll be another question session after your next section.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I just have a couple slides on probation, plot production, starting probation, and select plot production as well. Okay, so in order to produce select and foundation seed, the grower has to begin probation. So if you want to do your probation in wheat, you have to have at least 3 years of pedigreed seed production of wheat over the past 5 years, and that has to be credited to you in our system. So even if you have been working, you know, with your dad for many years, or your mom or whomever, but you're not on that crop certificate, you're not accruing those years of crop production history. So like I said, think about succession planning. If there's anybody who works with you, any family members who may want to start probation, good idea to get them on the account sooner rather than later so you can avoid the heartache of not being able to start probation. Okay, so to start probation, you would fill out the Form 154 that can be found on our website, on here, the plot production page. And it's in the, right here, application to commence probation plot production. It's not an electronic form yet, so it's a hard copy form that you can fill out and just scan it or email it back to us. CSJ will take a look at your crop production history, and then we'll send you a letter back saying yes or no, you're eligible to begin your probation, and here are the crop kinds that you can plant. Growers are encouraged to begin with breeder seed. I know that's tricky to get, so you can start with select seed if you can't find breeder seed, but send us the crop certificate numbers so that we can make sure that there are enough multiplications left on that seed to finish your probation. Probation does take 3 years to finish. So if you're a new grower, you'd have to have 3 years of production history. In your 4th year, you could apply for and begin probation, and then it would be 3 years of probation. And then at the end of that 6th year, you would be a select grower, provided everything went well with your probation plot production. So because you're not a select grower while you're doing probation, you would be harvesting foundation seeds. So you would plant that big breeder seed or that select seed, and at the end of your 1st year, you would receive a foundation crop certificate. CSJ is treating that foundation seed like select seeds, so we're tracking the multiplications in the generations. But if it's planted by anybody else, it's only foundation seed, and it's only eligible to produce registered or certified seed. So that foundation seed you harvest from your 1st year probation plot will be used to seed the 2nd year probation plot, which will result in another foundation crop certificate. In the 3rd year, you'll plant that foundation seed again, and at the end of it, you'll harvest select seed if everything has gone well. At the end of those 3 years, you would be recognized as a select grower. So once you have that status, you can plant as many plots as you like, of as many varieties as you like, but you know, please be cautious that you don't overextend yourself, because select plots do have to be rogued and maintained a little bit. There's a little bit more work that has to go into them. So for select plots, you would be considering parts 1 and parts 3 of section 1 in circular 6 and the crop specific standards in section 12. Select plots can be no more than 2.5 acres. If you present a plot that is significantly larger than 2.5 acres, CSJ will ask you to split the plot, and then you will need an inspection on both sections. Check the multiplication of your seed. If you're producing the seed yourself, you'll have that crop certificate, which at the bottom of it will say the multiplication of the seed. But if you're getting select seed from another grower, you may not necessarily have that information. So we are recommending that people include on the tag, just in the bottom corner, the multiplication of the seed as 1M for first multiplication, 2M, 3M, 4M, 5M. So if you don't see that on the select tag for the seed that you're getting from another grower, just ask them. Or you can send the crop certificate number to CSGA and we can confirm the number of multiplications that are left. We really don't want to see, and it seems to be happening a bit more frequently, where people are planting 5th multiplication seed, which isn't eligible to produce another generation of select seed without authorization from the breeder. So please just be aware of the multiplication of your seed. I should say that select plots can be staked out of a larger field. So if you're planting breeder or select seed in a large field, so you're going to be getting foundation for the larger portion of the field, but you also want to stake out a couple plots, you can do that. You can stake out however many plots you like. And this year, you can actually apply for those plots on the application for the foundation field. So when you submit the application for the foundation field and indicate the seed source as either breeder or select, a little question will pop up asking you if there are any plots within the field. If you say yes, it will give you the opportunity to indicate the field ID for each of those plots and the size of the plots, and then they will be processed on separate application forms, and they'll have their own sequence number in the crop history tab. So you don't have to submit a whole bunch of extra applications for those plots. They can be done right on the application for the foundation field. Are there any questions about select or probation plot production at this point?
Again, you can type into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question, or put your hand up and I will put you in the conversation. Okay, it doesn't appear there's any questions at this point. Thanks so much, Brianna.
Oh, hang on, there's one question from Nick.
Oh.
Says, where can stakes be used versus an isolation strip in plots? So stakes can be used where the seed source on the other side of the stakes is the same seed source that was used in the plot. So if you've planted breeder seed, you can use stakes to just isolate that plot. If you have used breeder seed to seed your plot, but you've used foundation seed around the plot, then staking is not appropriate, as the seed outside of the plots is not the same status as the seed that was planted in the plots. So in that case, you would be required to have, I believe it's a 3-meter isolation around the plot. So staking is only when it's the exact same seed source. Jordan says you need 3 years of seed production before you can start your 3-year probation. Yes, that is correct. You do need 3 years of pedigreed seed production credited in the CSGA database before you can start your 3 years of probation. So like I said, even if you've been working for your dad and you're not necessarily, sorry, I don't want to assume anything about your situation, but even if you're working with somebody else and been working there for many years, and you may even have been doing some of the roguing on those plots, if your name is not on the crop certificate and it's not in the database, then you're not being credited with those years of pedigreed seed production.
Thanks, Brianne. Just a note to everyone, when you're sending a question in, if you don't mind putting it to everyone, because then everybody can read the question as well, unless you're having a private conversation with somebody on the side, then that's different, because we're trying to keep track of some of the questions and answers. Any other questions? I don't see any hands up, and it doesn't appear that anybody's typing a message. So thank you, Brianna. We'll move on, and now you can unshare your screen again.
Oh, sorry about that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Lori, also for the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Right, so we're gonna move on, and Alyssa is gonna just talk a bit more about things. Her and I are both LSCI that inspect, and so we talked about it a bit, and so she's gonna give a little perspective from us as inspectors. Alyssa?
Thank you. Thank you, Brianna, for your presentation. It was very educational. I'll gloss over some of my points since Brianna's already covered a lot of it. So I don't think we need to talk about the combining fields or split because she's already talked about that. But providing accurate legal descriptions as well as your crop history, even your tag certification numbers. I can't speak for all licensed seed crop inspectors, but I mean, I know some would communicate with their clients prior to inspection to verify that your application is filled out correctly. And that is your opportunity to look through the land description, look through your tags, et cetera, to make sure everything is lined up. That's also perhaps your opportunity to look at your isolations so that your inspection starts smoothly and finishes smoothly so that we could avoid reinspection. Reinspection sometimes happens though anyway, and if you want to change isolation or roguing, or if you start roguing because you want to improve your reports, you could do that. Just contact your inspector to do so. We also would have to get notification from CSGA if we need to do an inspection as well. Reinspection, that is. Look over either your program of any inspection reports received to you, or even contact your inspector before you swath, before you harvest your fields. What else can I mention here? Yeah, read over your Circular 6, make sure you're updated on the weeds as well, and the weed order. That's all provided for you. And about uploading your maps, that is, you will get repetitive emails if you have not uploaded maps. Some points to understand, I guess, with regards to those maps. As a plot inspector myself, I use the maps a lot because I need to know where the map is in the field, or the plot is in the field, I'm sorry, as well as which plot is which. There could be many plots in a field. Sometimes your new inspectors need the map to verify. Some clients want to drive you to the field, that's okay, but you still need to upload a map because you're going to get those emails. So you could contact your licensed crop inspector to ask them what kind of map is okay for the inspector, or what they could upload. We could help you out in that. I think that's pretty much all I have. Is there anything else, Lori, that you want to add?
No, I think between you and Brianna, we've covered just about everything. We've mentioned the maps, the cropping history, isolations, and re-inspections, and I think those are some of the key things.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right.
I think. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alyssa. Sorry about that. Barry, you're up next. We're very fortunate to have two experienced growers who have decided to share some of their experience and wisdom. And the first person that's going to talk is Barry Reisner. And you're on, Barry.
Okay, thanks, Lori. I think there is one question just showed up for Alyssa, so maybe I should let her
Oh,
answer.
sorry.
Oh, sure, I could answer that question. The question is, if I have to use canola as a break crop, do I need to specify what variety of canola was used? Or is canola enough? Canola is enough. I don't, as an inspector, I don't, or I believe CSG doesn't need to know what variety of canola is unless the canola is a pedigree status canola. But if it's common canola, then canola is just good enough.
Brianna, do you have anything to add to that?
No, Alyssa's right. If there's no, you can just write canola. That's fine.
All right. Sorry about that. I don't see the chat when I have the screen up. So thanks for noticing that. Okay, Barry, did you want to go ahead now?
Okay, I will. Thank you, Lori, for all your work in organizing this, and thanks to Alyssa, and Brianna for that information. I've been going through Circular 6 myself for a lot of years, and I learned something this morning. So you're never too old to learn, and it's useful. So I put together a bit of a list of some seed growing tips, and it's by no means exhaustive. There's lots more that could be added to that, but I thought you'd get tired of hearing me drone on about these things. But it's just, to me, I just wanted to show you an example of how I operate, and I guess probably every seed grower could do this. Some of the things over the years that I've learned is that we just really need to be careful with regulations. I mean, Circular 6 is written in negative language, so it tells you what you can't do. But just because Circular 6 says that you can do it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a good practice every year. We work a lot of the things, everything that we do is with nature. Excuse me. And nature changes from year to year. So especially with land use, Circular 6 is written to try and keep us out of trouble. But we can still get into trouble by doing some things that may be all right as far as land use requirements, as far as volunteer crops coming up in our seed crop. And experience will tell you what is a good rotation and what is a risky rotation. And there's a lot of costs involved in producing seed, and if you have your crop decline because of volunteers, that's an expensive lesson. And I think most of us that have done this for a while have had that lesson. Excuse me. And further to that, Circular 6 is critical. Especially for newer growers to keep checking that. Don't trust your memory. Go back to Circular 6 and double check. But also remember, there is no Circular 6 for production methods. There's so many things involved in producing a pedigreed crop. There is no book that's written. All of us have our own procedures in our head. Some of us may have written some things down for some of our staff, and that continues to evolve. Our production practices, no matter how long you've been doing it, it's one we need to be trying to continually improve our procedures as new technologies and new techniques, new equipment evolve. We want to do things the most efficiently we can, and we want to have the best result. So it's common sense, but sometimes common sense doesn't necessarily work either. But that's basically what most of my my methods are based on common sense, and then you know, adjusted from experience over the years. Proper planning can be critical. If you make a mistake in your planning, and in the middle of July, you find out that you've got a bunch of roguing to do, you've got lots of time to be out there in the field with your thoughts, thinking that next year you'll do things differently. However, I mean, there is no guarantees. There are times when black swans come along, or things that you're not anticipating and you really can't anticipate. And the only way out of that is to either downgrade your crop to a lower status, or lose your crop, or put in the time to fix the problem. And the bigger the problem, the more time and effort it costs you to fix that problem. And on a field scale, there's some problems that you just can't fix. And one of the lessons that I've learned over the years is to put most of my effort into my higher pedigreed fields, particularly the select plots and the foundation fields. But the select plots are at a manageable size, and it is critically important that they be as pure as possible. And the standards are high, and for good reason. It benefits us to make sure that our select plots are absolutely as clean as possible. And then we have less problems going down through the other generations. One of the things that's a continuous issue for me is sanitizing our equipment. I've had the same brand of combine for 40 years, because it takes a number of years to get familiar with the inside of a combine, or inside of any piece of equipment, and to be aware of all the potential little problem areas that there are. And the manufacturers of equipment don't build them for seed growers. They build them for commercial producers. And we have to, there's two things we can do. We can modify them so that they do sanitize better or easier, or we just learn procedures to achieve that same result. And either way is effective, but time is a factor. When it's 30 degrees outside and there's another field to harvest, we want to be able to get that equipment cleaned and get it back out in the field as soon as possible, because you know, for us, same as any commercial producer, time is money. But we can't take shortcuts. We have to get the job done properly. As I said, there is no Circular 6 for production methods, but seed growers, you know, I think most of us are open to discussing how we do things if we're asked. We hesitate to get up in front of people and say what we do sometimes, but I don't think any of us that I've noticed over the years would hesitate to share how we do things if we're asked. So if you are a new seed grower or newer, and you have some questions, you know, talk to your neighboring seed grower or someone that you know from in the province, someone possibly that you've bought some seed from or that you have a relationship with. And it's not that it's proprietary information for most of us. We don't mind sharing that information if we're asked. Further to what I said about select plots, I guess, you know, the inseparable impurities, the ones that you can't fix with equipment, And no matter how good our equipment is, and it is much better than it used to be, there still are some things that you need to separate in the field, whether that be from proper land use or from proper herbicides or roguing. If we can get those pure at the higher generations, it's just the best way to be. And then the flip side of that is things that we introduce into our seed at a high generation. If it's inseparable, we need to understand that inseparable seed will be in our product for the life of that seed. So that's why we need to have stricter requirements at the higher pedigrees. And as we go down through the generations, there just has to be a little more room for impurities, because we just generally have more impurities at the certified level than we do at the select level. The other thing I had noted is labeling of bins and bags, and this has become recognized as of higher importance than it used to be, and I credit the changeover in the seed industry to CSI back about 25 years ago. That was a requirement that came in at that time, and it should have been done before as well, but it's become a higher priority lately, and it is critical. You go to all the work of producing a seed and processing it and getting it all the way through the system, and all it takes is one little mistake from you or one of your employees that just puts the end of that auger in the bin beside the one it was supposed to be in, and you can have a world of hurt and a lot of costs involved in trying to mitigate that mistake. So everyone can have their own system of how to do it, but it's critical that you need to have a good system. And for me, I take responsibility for that. I have a couple of employees, and they can help me with that, but someone has to be responsible for that. And to me, that's critical enough that I want to be responsible for it, because if there is a mistake, I'm the one that's going to pay for that mistake. So I take that as my responsibility. The next one thing that I had noted was purity standards. Most of our grade tables and any of the standards in Circular 6, there's usually a tolerance, and that's necessary. But I think our personal standards should be 100% purity, recognizing that that's not always achievable, but that should be our goal. And I think we need to have reasonable tolerances, but that doesn't mean our goal should be the tolerance. I think our goal should be for 100% purity. And in our own operations, I mean, we're all independent. We like it. That's one of the key things that we like about our business. We should constantly be trying to improve. Continuous improvement should be our goal every day, and that's continuous improvement in our product and in our methods. With the free enterprise system, it encourages continuous improvement, and we need to try to be more efficient. Our customers are price conscious, and anything we can do to become more efficient as far as doing things in a faster way without compromising our objective of 100% purity, I think we should constantly be trying to look for those things that we can put into the methods that we do to achieve our seed production. The last words that I had put down, the words of wisdom from a veteran, and that veteran is not me. That veteran was a veteran 25 years ago when I knew him, and he's actually been gone for a number of years now, and he told me a number of times, don't seed more plots than your spouse can rogue. And in his case, that was accurate because his spouse did most of the roguing on their farm, and he did grow a number of plots, and she was good at it. She was excellent. But the thought process behind that statement is not necessarily to say that your wife has to rogue all your plots. But no matter who's doing the roguing of your plots, experience will tell you everyone has their limit of how many they can grow or should grow. And we just need to manage what we can handle, and don't get in over our head, or it can be a long summer. I think that's about all I have, Lori. I want to leave time for others, and I think I haven't laid out a lot of specifics about how I do things. It's more about the concepts, and the specifics are kind of up to each of us.
Thanks, Barry. We'll move on to, if there's any questions, we'll handle it once we get after Roy's presentation and Lyndon. So just keep them in the queue, keep putting them into the chat room. And I'm going to stop sharing now. So Roy, you can bring up your presentation. And so Roy Van Wyk is going to be talking about things from the CSI perspective. And Roy, take it away.
Sorry, I don't think I was unmuted there. Can you can hear me, Lori?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, well, thanks, Lori. Really appreciate the opportunity to present today, and I think what a great program. We've already heard a lot of great presentations, a lot of words of wisdom from Barry and others there. And anyway, today I thought maybe just before we dive into the orientation, I'll give you a little bit of background about CSI. We were formed in the late 1990s. It was really a CFIA had been going through a cost recovery process, and as an outcome of that, the work they were doing for the oversight of the facilities that were processing and labeling certified seed, they delegated that responsibility, the oversight of that activity, to the industry. And so the industry came together, the Canadian seed growers and the Canadian seed trade, the commercial seed analysts, to form CSI to do that oversight. I guess the concerns really at the time were that they didn't want a foreign, an oversight body that didn't know and understand the seed industry to do the oversight activity. And so CSI was born then around 1998, and shortly after we were established, and the Alberta seed processors and Quebec conditioners became members of CSI as well. So ultimately, our goals here, I was put up our mission statement there, but ultimately the objectives are to deliver our services in a timely, efficient, cost-effective manner, and hopefully make it an enjoyable experience for everyone. I just wanted to give you a little bit more background here. So the Seed Association members are CSGA, CSTA, and CSAC, and I'm just showing you the list of people involved here for each that represent the organizations on the CSI board. And Roy Klim, I think, is on the call today. Just want to acknowledge him for his work with CSI and his ongoing work actually in the Oversight Committee as well. So he's with us today. And then the general members, of course, Luc Verdon represents the Quebec Conditioners, Monica Kloss, the Alberta Seed Processors, and Les Trowell, also from Saskatchewan, has been on the board of CSI for quite a few years and is the past president right now. And as far as internally as the program goes, on the left there you see in the green, we were established as the Canadian Seed Institute, and that was to do the oversight of the seed program, the approved conditioners, bulk storage facilities, and so on. But as the years passed, there about 3 or 4 years after we were established, we've got involved into other programs, and so we have another stream. So under the Center for Systems Integration, we manage other programs, the Canadian Grain Commission and their identity preservation food safety programs. We do audit for them. Canada Organic Regime, we're an organic certification body, and we do other third-party verifications for special label claims like antibiotic-free chicken and farm sustainability assessments and so on. So today what I'm hoping to achieve anyway is to give you a bit more, hopefully, for those of you who don't know CSI and what we do, you have a bit more better understanding about how the seed certification system works in Canada, who's responsible for what, and then really lead into CSI's program. And so you understand how the RC scopes are structured, and who the personnel are that work within RSC and how they're licensed and accredited, what the documents you ultimately need to certify seed and how certified is seed and labeled. So all this is generally just in general terms, but hopefully it gives you a much better, clearer understanding of the seed program and CSI's role in particular. When you're looking at the seed program, there's a lot going on. CFIA, though, I would say if you're looking at the picture at the top, CFIA is the national designated authority in Canada. So every country that trades seed internationally needs to have a national designated authority. In Canada's case, it has and always has been CFIA. But under that program, we're very unique. There's a number of delegations of responsibility. So if I was to go back to the beginning, really, the first delegated authority, the responsibility was CSGA's role, and goes back to the early 1900s when CSGA was written into the Seeds Act. And over time, so they look after, as you know, already know, they set the standards for seed crop production, recognize seed growers and the breeders, and they certify seed crops. If we're moving across, then CFIA, so I should say that they're noted in the Seeds Act. So it's their authority comes from there and in the Act and regulations. So that they're very, very unique in the seed program in Canada. The rest of the organizations, if I'm going right to left, the ACES, the approved service providers for seed crop inspection, and the licensed seed crop inspectors, they're accredited and licensed by CFIA directly, and CFIA does the oversight of the ACES and check inspections of the licensed seed crop inspectors and so on. So that's all, that program is still run by CFIA, and the oversight is completely by CFIA, but it's the ACES now that's probably 95% plus of the seed crops are inspected by the ACES and the LSCI. If we continue to go right, there's CSAC in the orange. There, the CFIA continues to accredit analysts and does the initial accreditation of seed labs, but the CSAC is in place. They have it's probably best described as a professional recognition program. So they set sort of the ethical and code of conduct for analysts, and then work on trying to deliver some ongoing professional education programs for them. So I would say they're a professional, best way to describe them would be a professional organization. They don't accredit the analysts, though. That's the role of CFIA. So I would say that maybe there's about 120 to 130 analysts that are accredited right now across Canada, and 80 to 90 perhaps are recognized by our members of CSAC and our maintain that professional accreditation through CSAC. Moving across then to the far left is CSI. So CSI, CFI authorizes CSI to do the work that we do, and they do audits. They audit us to make sure we're doing our work appropriately. And our job as CSI, we do all these things below. We evaluate and audit, train, recommend for registration and licensing the personnel and the registered seed establishments. We do the ongoing assessments of seed labs. And we have within our own program there, we have a standard set for the auditors and call audit bodies, the companies that have groups of auditors that work for them, who then deliver the seed facility audits. So that's just a very quick view of how the program works in Canada and who has what responsibility. So what I'm going to dig into more now in my presentation is what's what CSI does versus what CFIA does, so it's a little bit more clear for everybody. And then I'll get into our program in a little bit more detail. So this is where the rest of my presentation is focused. So if I'm looking side, things aren't perfectly lined up from the left to the right here, but on the right-hand side, CSI's responsibility is just to compare them to CFIA's. Well, we're delegated, we've been delegated authority through an agreement we have signed with CFIA that lays out all the things below here that I list. So they call it a conformity verification body agreement, is officially what it's called, but that's a mouthful. But basically that's an oversight body is essentially what that can be translated into. So we do, we look after, so to do our program then, we have theory evaluations that we've set up for the operators of the seed facilities, for graders, and for SICAs, which is a grader that looks after imported seed. And so we have evaluations that have set up evaluations for those individuals that are accredited to become, that they need to pass in order for us to recommend them for accreditation to CFIA. We do the initial and ongoing audits of the seed facilities. So we make recommendations to CFI then for the registration of the registered seed establishments and the personnel that work in them. When the first step of when they're done, the first the first oversight, the first initial audit is done, and so on. The CSI that does the does the recommendation for registration to CFIA. And then we'll also, in our ongoing audit program, if there's any issues that lead to suspension, then it would be CSI that would recommend for suspension and cancellation of the RSEs, operators and graders. For the RSE and lab auditors, our auditors anyway, we have a structure internally to manage the auditors. So we have a quality management system standard that we've set up. We set the competency requirements for the auditors. We recognize the audit bodies. So like very similar to the RSEs, the audit bodies need to have a quality management system in place and show how they're maintaining the competency and ongoing training of their auditors. So very, very similar. It's a ISO-based system, just like the RSE program is. And then we provide and deliver training. And sometimes we facilitate training that may be delivered by CFIA and other organizations may be responsible for the technical aspects of the programs we deliver. So as far as the program delivery of the seed program, we collect the annual RSE fees. We set those as well. So the fees are structured based on the scope of the accreditation, the personnel, and we also have a fee for a variable fee that's tied to the number of lots the facilities clean. We deliver operator and grader training. So CFI used to do some training, probably about, it's been about 8 years now since they probably did their last training. So since then, CSI has been delivering training for graders, and periodically we do training for operators as well. We maintain the ACE, the approved conditioner, bulk storage facility, and authorized importer technical manuals. So that goes right back to our beginning days where the stakeholders in industry helped to develop those technical manuals. They've been updated over time, but those are technical manuals that we use as far as for the program. And probably one important note is that all the RSEs are treated the same. It doesn't matter what size, how big or how small they are. The requirements are exactly the same for all of them in the program. From the CFIA side, now we're looking for where they're responsible. Again, they're the overall seed authority in Canada. So really they're responsible for the seed regulations in their entirety. So there's things in there in the seed regs that are important to I could signal out things like the seed standards, so everything on how you grade, for instance, the grade tables and the grade names, how seed is labeled, what the official certification label versus the additional information label, and so on. All those seed standards are set out in the regulations. And they manage variety registration and the requirements for the pedigreed seed declarations and so on. So that's all CFIA's responsibility and more. They credit us, of course, as the conformity, as the verification body, the oversight body for the seed certification activities. They accredit all the personnel and the RSCs, the facilities. So they're the registrar as well. So although it's a rubber stamp process really for them, when we recommend to them, they document the RSC that's registered in their system, issuing the RSC number and the grader and operator numbers. And they also administer a practical grader evaluation. So when anyone wants to become a grader, for instance, there's a CSI theory evaluation, but then there's also a practical evaluation that a new grader would need to write. And that's, that's an identification. They'll be identifying, weeds, what weeds are, what different crop kinds are. And they go through other exercises, but it's a practical evaluation that done by CFIA. And then, of course, they're responsible, really overall responsible for oversight, and those oversight activities include enforcement. So if there's any infringements or any issues out there in seed, if there's any fraudulent activities, it would be CFIA that lays the charges for infringements against the Seeds Act or the seed regs. They can detain seed, for instance, if there's issues with it, and they can issue orders to destroy seed lots. And we haven't seen that in some time, but I know there were lots a number of years ago related, particularly in the pulse crops that may have had anthracnose or things of those nature that CFI had ordered destroyed. So there, it's their responsibility. Although we recommend, CSI could recommend suspension or cancellation of a facility, it would be CFI though that ultimately is the one that would be suspend and cancels RSCs and the operators and the graders. They'll also do target place monitoring. So even though we do, CSI may audit an RSC, CFI will still periodically drop in at different facilities. They may come in, they're not doing an audit, but they might be drawing samples from seed that's been sealed or from the bins. They may take a look at the sample of the tags, for instance, to make sure the information on the tags is labeled accurately, and they may look at some records to make sure the records are in place. So that's part of their, as the overall authority in Canada, that's part of their prerogative, and they have the right to come in and do their marketplace monitoring. And they also do, like I said, they conduct surveillance at seed establishments. So likely if you're close to a CFIA office and you're already an RSC, you probably have already had a visit from them. Well, I would guess a number of times. So that's a lot to absorb, but that's sort of where CSI and CFIA's responsibilities are separated. Oops. So the RSC program, RSC audits, if I was sort of talking more now about the program structure, this was really, we sort of picked up on the program structure that CFI was using. So when they did when they were doing oversights of the seed establishments back in the mid 1990s, that inspection, I guess that sort of was the beginning of where they left off. So I guess is where we started, and they were beginning to move towards a quality management system and ISO principles. So CSI really has developed its program based on those ISO 9001 principles. And so anyone who's involved in the quality management systems know that they, ISO is based on, the principles include management responsibility. They draw in, you need to have a quality policy in place and documented quality management system. You have things like purchasing are described you have a method for document control. You have to train staff and so on. Those are all elements of an ISO system. And so everything that CSI has done to help build the program is around those ISO principles. So we have we've developed these quality manual templates. And so there's one for an AC and BSF and another one for an authorized importer. They're really a template for new RSCs to use as a template for us to set up their own quality management system. So you could use those. Those are in place. Then you could take them and adapt them to your facility. So then we also have, well, I guess we should say here, records are at the core of any quality management system. And I think Barry kind of alluded to the importance of documentation and records, but in any system we do, these, I guess I would say, they're the backbone of the system, keeping good records. So anything that you do when you're selling seed and processing seed, anything, if there's any concerns or issues with the seed that you've sold, your records will save you. Having the good documentation in place to deal with any issues and you're able to easily trace them back where the problem is. The records are the backbone and the core of your quality management system. And then also for us, so the other part of the records, we need those as far as CSI's activity. And when we're conducting audits, there's a number of different ways we do that when we come in with an auditor, but the records are ultimately tell the story. So as long as you've got the records in place, you'll be interviewed, you'll be asked questions and so on, but you've got the records to demonstrate what you've done. And so the records, they're the key piece of information that we need during an audit to help verify that you're doing the work you're doing, labeling and processing seed that's compliant with both the seed regs and the Seeds Act. So now just digging in a little bit more to the program, these are we'll talk a little bit, just describe the RSC scope. So this is, this kind of helps you better understand, what seed activity you're doing and what kind of scope you need to have. And so approved conditioners. So this scope of activity, read anything to do with conditioning of seed. So whether you're cleaning the seed, you're mixing seed, blending, treating, inoculating, and ultimately packaging and seed and labeling it with the pedigreed seed tag. That's the activity of an approved conditioner. So our abbreviation there, AC. You'll hear, I may slip back and forth from saying AC or approved conditioner, but that's what I mean. So that's all the activities of someone that's approved to condition seed. There's also bulk storage facilities. So this is not a facility that's processing seed. They're strictly set up as a facility that's been accredited to be able to handle and sell seed in bulk. So seed that's been already cleaned and processed and ready for and graded. That's the purpose of a bulk storage facility. Authorized importers. This is a process, not all seed is imported through authorized importers, but a big, I would hazard a guess, maybe 50% of the seed coming into Canada is processed through authorized importers. But basically, this is an accreditation that allows facilities to streamline the process for importing seed. The requirements don't really change, but for people who import a lot of seed, it helps speed up their importation process so that they have minimal basically documentation that's needed at the border for the seed to be imported, but it essentially will go into a quarantine when it's imported by the authorized importer until all the paperwork is in place. And if there's labeling if seed that's been imported needs to be relabeled, and the labeling is done before it can it's moved out then and released from quarantine and ready for circulation. So it's just it's a accreditation that probably about a little over 80 companies in Canada are authorized as importers. So if you're only bringing in a couple loads of seed a year, then this is not necessarily an accreditation that you need. And then the last scope, it's a mouthful, the CPCPS, the Canadian Phytosanitary Certification Program for Seeds. This is essentially for companies that are working in the garden seed industry and shipping, vegetable and herb seed from Canada to the US. So it's the small packets of seed for the garden seed industry. And it's a process, if you can imagine, when you do phytosanitary or purity tests on large, grain crops and so on, trying to do that on these small packets of seed, it's a bit of a different ball game. So this process, this program helps expedite that phytosanitary testing program and the movement of seed across the border into the US. And so those are the scopes. And then a lot of facilities tend to have these combinations of scopes as well. So I thought it was worth kind of saying there's, ACs, approved conditioners are common. Well, they're common across Canada, but in Eastern Canada in particular, a lot of seed still moves in bags, in 25 kg or 50-pound bags, or in these mini bulk, usually 1-ton mini bulk bags, and with the tags sewn on to the bag. So they either sewed on to the tote, the mini bulk tote, or onto the bag itself. That's in Western Canada, though, there's a lot of seed that moves in bulk. There's some that moves in Eastern Canada, but it's more common in Western Canada. And so this is where, where the, a farmer or a producer can come in with their truck or with their gravity wagon, for instance, and the seed that's already been cleaned and processed and graded can be loaded into the farmer's vehicle or truck. And then instead of a tag going on that, it's a bulk certified tag that goes along with the invoicing. So, there's a lot of line elevator companies, in particular in Western Canada, that become bulk storage facilities to help facilitate the movement of seed in bulk. And there's also a lot of seed growers, particularly in Western Canada, that are big enough to sell seed in bulk as well. A lot of facilities that are both approved conditioners and bulk storage facilities. There's many that carry both registrations. The authorized importer, probably what I didn't say earlier is importers, authorized importer, they can import both pedigreed and common seed for sale into Canada. And they can also import single species or mixtures and blends. And so there's those there's a few authorized importers, that's all they do, but generally speaking, they tend to be associated with an approved conditioner. So looking at the personnel then within the facilities, we have an to operate both in an approved for an AC, so for an approved conditioner, they can work for a bulk storage facility, or it can work for one that's both a approved conditioner and a bulk storage facility. The operator basically is responsible for all the seed activities that happen in a registered seed establishment. That's a little bit different than the grader. The grader's responsibilities are limited to grading seed. And I should probably say that you can be, the same person can be an AC operator, can be the operator of a facility and the grader. That doesn't matter, but you have to have both designations then most growers will have both designations if they're a grower run operation and they work alone. Bulk storage facility operator, if you only carry a BSF operator accreditation, then you're only licensed to operate a bulk storage facility. So if you're an existing bulk storage facility and you decide to become an approved conditioner as well, then the operator would need to become accredited as an AC operator as well. But if you're already an approved conditioner and you decide to become a bulk storage facility, then you have the accreditation. You need to be a bulk storage facility as well. An AI operator, of course, they're responsible for all the activities that an AI does to import seed. We have two types of graders, I guess they're worth noting, or three really: the GB grader, GD grader, and SICA. GD grader just is a grader of documents. So a GB grader basically is licensed to grade large seed crop kinds. So in the grade tables, I think it's grade tables 1 through 6, essentially, where they can do essentially the same sort of purity analysis that the seed labs would do, where they would draw the sample, prepare the appropriate volume of seed to analyze, fork through the seed, identify the impurities, classify those, retrieve them, I guess the impurities, classify them, and then use those impurities to grade the seed. Whereas a GD grader grades from documents. So we'll see those from the rest of the grade tables, some 7 on, where really need the labs, things like canola and the grass seeds and so on. You need the lab or a bit more professional background to be able to do the purity analysis. Those are submitted back to the purity analysis, would come back to the grader, and he would grade, he or she would grade, do grading analysis, assign a grade based on the document. So when you're looking then, the combination of facilities and the personnel, so if you're an approved conditioner, in order for you to operate, you need an AC operator and a grader of record at your facility. If you're a bulk storage facility, you need either a BSF operator, or you need to have an AC operator to run a bulk storage facility. The seed, usually the seed that moves to bulk storage facility is already graded, so you don't necessarily need a grader, but there are cases where growers, seed growers who are not registered as approved conditioners, they may have a grader. They may become a grader recognized by CFIA, and then they can grade their own seed as well and move it as bulk, but they'd still need to be accredited as a bulk storage facility. Of course, an AC and an AC BSF would need an AC operator and a grader of record. Authorized importers would need an AI operator, and they may need a SICA, which is the grader for the grader that looks after seed that's imported. And then, of course, AC and AI, if you're in a facility that has both those accreditations, then you need an AC operator and an AI operator. They can be, again, they can be the same person, but you need both those credentials. And then you need a grader of record, a GB grader or GD grader, depending on what kind of seed you're working with. And you may also need a SICA. It's probably worth knowing that the number of authorized importers may use a lab, may use the SICA at a lab to do their work for them. So there's quite a few cases where that's the case. So instead of having that type of a grader, SICA grader on their staff, they use a lab. And so they note that in their quality management system that they're working with this particular lab and this particular who has a SICA grader on staff. Generally speaking, I would say, so all the personnel, if you're active, everything's fine as far as your accreditation goes. But if an operator or grader are not active for more than 3 years, and they just want to come back in and start being a grader or an operator for a facility, then they would need to start over at square one again and redo the process of becoming recognized, to redo the evaluation to become an operator and a grader. So kind of coming full circle now here, when seed is certified, there's really three documents, 3 pieces of information that's needed. So you need a crop certificate issued by CSGA. There needs to be a certificate analysis that describes the % germ of the seed lot. And you need a certificate analysis that describes the purity of the seed, or if you have a grader, the grading record. And so those 3 pieces of information, they're all tied together. It'll let you go and look at the weed seeds order then, and I'll let you look at the grade tables then to make a decision on certified, how to label the seed. So that you need to know the right information to be able to grade and put that information on the blue certified tag. So if I just jump ahead quickly to the next slide. So if we're looking at this example, you're looking at AC Canada wheat. It's got a crop certificate, it was issued a crop certificate number, and the variety we've checked and as well, the variety is registered. It's 92% germ from the germination certificate. And in this case, either grading record or the certificate analysis from the purity side show that there's 1 barley, 2 lamb's quarters, and no ergot when they did the purity analysis. So if I was just to jump ahead here and you're looking at the grade table, in this case, Schedule 1 in the seeds regs, Table 1, which is used for wheat, common wheat and durum wheat. If I was looking down in that table, so I go down and this crop certificate is certified. So I'm looking at either row 5 or row 6 here. So it's certified seed for the crop certificate. The germ was 92%. So the minimum germ for common wheat to make certified number 1 in this case is 85%. So we're okay. This is good. There was, I have to go back and look here, 1 barley and 2 lamb's quarters. So I'm going back here now and I'm looking across here in certified number 1 wheat. I can have up to 1 barley. So that's okay as far as other crop kinds, and total weeds, I'm allowed 3. Lamb's quarters is not a noxious, a primary noxious or secondary noxious. So I'm allowed up to 2 other weeds, or 2 total weeds in this case, or up to 3, sorry. This case, I only have 2. So as far as green goes, I'm okay looking at the weeds, I'm okay. I meet Canada certified number 1. I'm okay as far as other crop kinds go, and on purity or on germination as well. So going through that exercise, then I can label now, I can complete the grade and label this seed, a lot of seed that I've just cleaned and processed, as Canada certified number 1 AC Canada wheat. And then you complete the tag, continue to complete the tag. Just thought I'd show you briefly what a report of analysis might look like from a lab. This is typical structure of a reports of analysis. So often, in order to be able to properly grade seed, you have to have a reference number. I think we've opened it up. Usually it's a lot number, a crop certificate number. I think now you can even have the year and the sequence number from CSGA on the crops, from the crops, or that eventually show up on the crop certificate. You can have that as well on the variety name in order for this to be able to link directly to that particular lot of seed that you're sealing. So that information is usually designated on the report of analysis. There's a section here that gives the information on the purity analysis. So it looks at prohibited noxious weeds. It reports on primary noxious and secondary noxious. So the numbers would show up in the analysis, and also total number of weeds. So this would be the information then. Part of the information you need to look at the grade tables and assess whether how the seed can be graded. There may be a requirement, depending on the crop kind you're working with. There may be, you may be dealing with ergot bodies, for instance. So here in this case, wheat, this is a barley that has 2 ergot bodies in it. So this is a grading factor as well in barley. So that would be something you'd have to look at as well. And then the final piece that you need here is germination analysis. And so the germ, this is 90% germ here. You need that piece of information as well. So you need an official purity analysis report and a germ report. And in the case of barley, you need to know how many ergot bodies are there in order to grade the seed. But this is typically what the certificate analysis from a lab would look like. And moving on, if you want to become, if you're interested in becoming an RSE, this is just a quick outline of the flow of what needs to happen. So there's the application. The good news is it's a very short 1-page document. You would submit that along with a small application fee. That's usually $300 to CSI, and that's what starts the whole process. Then the legwork begins, because then you have to complete, you need to make sure you have your personnel in order for the RSE. So you need to complete either an AC operator, the AC operator grader, or the BSF operator or AI operator theory evaluation. So one of those, depending on what accreditation and licensing you're looking for. So those you'd receive from you contact CSI, we'd send them to you. You complete the evaluation offline. So this is an open book evaluation. You'll have to go look at the seed regs to find a lot of this information. But that's part of the exercise to have you go through and familiarize yourself with the regs and where this information that a grader and operator will need, where that is in the seed regs. You submit the evaluation back to CSI. We'll mark it and give you your percentage. And I think the passing percent is 80%. Once we have the evaluations marked, we make note to CFIA. We pass that information along to CFIA so that the personnel could be recognized. And so at some point after CFIA, it may take a couple weeks, but CFIA will register and license the individuals, and you'll get a certificate from CFIA saying you're an operator grader and have your operator grader number. Moving on, then you need to start working to draft your quality manual for your RSC. So can you use the quality manual templates that we have as a guideline? There is help to do that. So the quality manual, yourself, or you can hire a CSI auditor to help you draft your quality manual or give you some guidance. So once your quality manual is ready, then you need to have your quality manual and viewed. So that's done by a CSI auditor. So you have to hire a CSI auditor to do that. So they'll do the review of your quality manual. They may make suggestions for you where there may be some shortcomings. And if everything's in order, the CSI auditor will then approve your quality manual and make a recommendation to CSI. So we'll receive that at the office then, review it, and then it will make a recommendation based on that to CFIA. That's step number 5. So once that recommendation goes into CFIA, CFIA will issue, the CFIA will register the RSC and issue an RSC number. And once the RSC number is issued, the facility can start, if you're an AC, you can start processing seed, or if you're a bulk storage facility, you can start handling seed in bulk. But you're still, you need to have an audit though yet within 6 months of becoming registered. And the reason why we don't audit right away is that you to operate, to test your system, to start generating records. So, you know, for lots that you may be sealing or seed that you may be shipping in bulk, to start generating some records so we can see, and labeling seed and so on, so we can take a look at your quality management system and the records you've generated and how you're moving seed and maintaining the integrity of the seed in each seed lot as it moves through your facility and through your cleaning system. So we can't really test that and do a good evaluation of it until you've handled seed for a little while and you have records in place. So usually we give up to 6 months now for facilities to, once they're registered, to operate before initial audit's needed. And of course, once you're accredited and licensed, you have your initial audit, then you pay your annual RSC fees and to maintain your accreditation. The audit program itself, so you require, generally speaking, if you're an AC or a BSF, you need to have an audit every 2 years. Once you've had 2 successful audits, the third audit could be substituted. Instead of doing a full on-site audit, there's a program where you could submit samples to a lab and have those analyzed against the way you graded them. And if everything's in order, that program there is a possibility for you instead of having a full audit. So then instead of having a physical audit every 2 years, you'd have a physical audit every 4 years. And in the 2 years in between, you could participate in this, what we call our increased interval program, where you submit samples for monitoring purposes instead. Authorized importers require an audit every 2 years. There is no increased interval program for them. Labs require audit every 3 years. And if you're in that phytosanitary program, shipping small packets of garden seed to the US, then you require an audit on an annual basis. Oops. So this is just to give you a sense, if it's your audit year, you'll get a notice from, if it's your year that you're due for an audit, you'll get a notice from CSI saying, hey, you're due for an audit this year. Just reminding that you need to reach out to an auditor and book an audit sometime through the year. If, by June we haven't heard back from you, or an auditor to say that there's an audit been booked, then we'll send you a second reminder and we'll say, hey, guys, we haven't heard anything, don't forget, you need to book this audit. And then again, if we haven't heard from you still in October, then we get a little bit more concerned, and we send this final reminder letter saying, oh, look, make sure you get an audit soon before the end of the year, because if you don't, then you may lose your accreditation. And so that's sort of the way we follow up each year with the RSCs that need an audit. If you're ready to have an audit, then there's CSI publishes its list of auditors on our website, and so you can. We don't assign the auditor; you have the opportunity to pick the auditor you want to work with. The information on the website and in that list includes the auditor, where they live, what province they're in, and should have their physical address as well. The areas, it'll list out the areas that they service and the scope of their accreditation. So if you're an AC, you just need to find an AC. If you're in Manitoba and you prefer them not traveling too far, then you can find an auditor that works in Manitoba that can audit an approved conditioner. So when the auditors come in, then they'll perform your audit. They'll evaluate the RSC for compliance with the SEEDS Act and the regs and the CSI's RSC standard. If there's any issues, they'll issue non-conformance, and you don't need to be surprised. These things are often easily resolved, but it's a way of communicating that says, oh, you recognize you missed something in your documentation, or you didn't process things quite right, or you labeled seeding correctly, and there can be a quick education from the auditor on how that's properly done. You update your quality manual if that's the case, and quality management system to try to correct whatever issue it might have been, and the non-conformance can be closed. So once they're closed and everything's in order, there'll be an ongoing recommendation report that comes from the auditors to CSI, and they'll continue your accreditation. The auditors will bill you directly, so that relationship with your auditor is between you and the auditor, so the actual audit doesn't flow through CSI as far as the billing goes. And then I'm down near the end, so I just thought, for interest's sake, you may want a sense of, 2018. There's just some stats for you of where we were in Canada as far as approved conditioners, bulk storage facilities, and authorized importers. So just for you to, if you're scanning that, that's the overall, the dark green bar on the left in the groups is that's the number of approved conditioners. The lighter green bar in the middle is the number of bulk storage facilities, and the yellow bar is the number of authorized importers, and then the purple bar, which is barely visible, is the U.S. exporters. So generally speaking, across Canada, there's about probably about 500 to 600 approved conditioners. There's about 750 or more bulk storage facilities, and about around 80 authorized importers, and about 10 to 15 companies that operate in the authorized exporter program, that CPCPS program. That gives you an idea that there's an awful lot of bulk storage facilities when you look across how important the bulk seed facilities are as far as the movement of seed. So that's more for interest's sake, and that wrapped things up for me, guys. So I'm ready for questions here.
Thanks, Roy. There was one question posted in the chat. How are training sessions being handled with the current COVID crisis?
We're kind of we have a lot of things that we're dealing with right now as far as CSI goes in our program delivery side. So there's the greater training sessions, there's the audits themselves. We're wrapped up the greater training sessions, fortunate that we have planned for this year so far. So the one in Saskatchewan in particular was delivered there about I can't remember now, must have been early mid-January. So that piece there, we haven't gotten to that just yet. We probably, if things persist, if the issue lasts longer, then we'll be, the theory side of the greater training, we'll probably look at moving it to an online course. It's something we've been talking about anyway. Then the practical side of the greater training session, where we have these kits that we bring to us for the participants, where we know we have a known impurity, known set of impurities that are in these seed samples. And so people go through the exercise in the training session to pick through the seed, retrieve the impurities, and then go through that exercise of classifying and mock grading that sample of seed. And so those sorts of things will have to be creative. Maybe we can do, we can do that through some sort of video, a little bit more creative, I guess, on that particular part. So we're still working through that, but unfortunately that's a lower priority. We're working through now sort of the potential to do some of our audits for low risk and a bit more basic facilities through virtual audits. So using whether it's Skype or Microsoft Teams or GoToMeeting or things of that nature to be able to do a video portion to the audit. So we're still working through some of those details, and we're waiting. We don't have any official guidance yet either from CFIA on whether or not they support those initiatives. We've got some, nonverbal support, to be creative in how we deliver the audits as well.
Okay, thanks. Next question is, how many years do the bulk storage facilities and the conditioners need to keep their seed records?
The requirements are 2 years. We encourage it longer, but it only really only 2 years.
Okay. Okay, Mike has a question.
Yeah, wondering when it do log blend, and maybe we're under CA scope. So I'll give you an example. I have 3 fields that are a midge tolerant blend. So there's fields, they're separate fields. So I'll have a sequence number. I go to test. I have to get different test results for each field. But each one of those fields, they're all block. They have, the same parent seed was all harvested at the same time. I think it's adding unnecessary segregation to test all these separately and set them separately and store them separately. Whereas a blend could be made at harvest time with all 3 fields being harvested the same, and just get one kind of sample off of them. So I think, like, my suggestion would be kind of more to CSGA when you're filling out your Form 182 with your midge tolerant wheat results, that you could add in there, was this a blend between these sequence numbers? So that's just kind of my thoughts there.
Thanks, Mike. I think there's a couple of layers to this, because it's one thing, there's no problem with a grower or a facility, putting lots of different seed in the same bin. It's up to them how they manage it. Often, CSGA, if you have one variety and you're growing it on 5 fields, it's certified status, you'll get 1 crop certificate usually for all those, if you're a grower, for all those 5 fields. And so you end up with the same crop certificate number. So it's, you're not really in those cases, and that's very, very common. Traceability then is the way the seeds manage is to those 5 fields. It's not to one particular field. Smaller producers, they may have just 1 field, and then that's not very typical though. So there are, from a RSE perspective though, we have that. Not only do we have that, but if you have a variety, Mike, and another grower has a variety, the same variety, they're both certified seed, 2 different crop certificate numbers, and even a third one, third grower, and they're all I'm an RSC and I'm receiving that same variety certified status, I can put those all in the same bin. We call it pancaking. And so there's ways to segregate it in the same bin during pancaking. Not necessarily the best way, but you need to keep track of those records Usually if you're going to do that, though, as an RSC, that becomes one lot. And on the pedigreed seed declaration, you would note each lot that went into making that, each crop certificate that went into making that lot. It gets a little bit more complicated when you get into midge tolerant wheat because you have those two elements. You have the midge tolerant variety, and then you have the refuge variety. So I think your comments, you were breaking up a little bit, so I didn't quite hear your comments, so I can't comment on them.
I think I understood some of what he was saying, and I can address that if everybody. But basically, we do recommend that each field be tested separately. In the case that you have a drift between the ratio of the two varieties in that field due to whatever environmental conditions there might have been, sometimes varieties perform differently and have different yields. If you do have a field where the variety has drifted and you blend it with the other fields, you are risking having all of your seed demoted if the ratio isn't within the range for that specific class. Having said that, if you are harvesting everything together and you're blending it together, there's no point in having two tests from the same lot because you're going to get something close to the same answer. So in those cases where we do receive test analysis that have multiple sequence numbers included on them, we will put a warning on the crop certificate saying that, you know, not each field was tested separately, but we will still allow that. You will have to complete, at this point in time, because the Form 182 isn't adjusted for these situations, you'll have to submit a Form 182 for each sequence still, but you can attach the test results that include each of those sequence numbers on it to both of those Form 182. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for that. I was actually at that warning on my crop certificate, so I bring it up. So that's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There was a follow-up question about the 2 years, and the question was, is it 2 years or 2 years after disbursement of the last lot?
Once the lot sealing records from the point of sale, that's the records need to be kept following the point of sale for 2 years. So they, if you still have seed sitting around in a lot that's hasn't been dispersed yet, then you need to keep the records in case you plan to sell that seed another time. But from the point of sale, you'd only need to keep the records for 2 more years.
Thanks, Roy. Are there any other questions? We're going to move on and have Lyndon give some perspective as an experienced seed grower on some of these things, but please feel free to submit more questions through the chat. All right. I'm just bringing it up, Lyndon. Oh, there you go.
Thank you very much, Lori. I'm going to pick it up a bit where Roy was a little while ago with the RSCs responsible for the keeping of records, and that is true, and that is, you know, the minimum requirements for this. What I'm going to talk about a little bit more is the inventory tracking that you have to do to help your RSC. If you're the same grower and RSC together, that's fine, so that you have some inventory tracking to help you assist in making sure your records at the end are accurate. I encourage everyone that they should develop their own tracking system on their farm as a seed grower, and each one of these tracking systems should be unique to your operation or fit whatever you're needing, or be applicable to how you operate. I know around here, some of us are good with paper and some people up in the field are not so good with paper. So sometimes we have to adapt a tracking system that involves a cell phone, etc., so that we get the information on time and that it's accurate, and that's the critical point. Inventory tracking on our situation starts with the application from the field inspection. We have a field inspection and we end up with a sequence number on your crop certificate that's provided by CSGA. And from that, our system, we develop our lot number right off the bat. Created at that point, and this assigning a lot number to basically still a crop is pretty early, but we got another way of keeping its identity and keeping the same identity that's going to follow through right to the end. So creating this lot number for us is key to keeping the identity as it moves through the different people and systems. Once we've identified this, then we actually have bins assigned for that crop even before it's harvested. And again, as Barry had alluded to earlier, we have a tracking system that the office is a designated bins. No one out in the field has picked the bin. And again, our system is recording all of this. All movements are recorded. And again, we'll use a text service or a phone app. So if anyone moves grain on our farm or to or from our plant, that has to be authorized by the office, and it has to be recorded at the end of the day from the person who moved that grain. So we automatically have a tracking system because your phone says what date it was recorded and the time, and our tracking system has already started. From there, even before this crop is harvested, labels and stuff that are going to be required down the road are already pre-printed. And again, so that I don't make mistakes re-recording a lot number or a specific field ID, all that thing is populated on a program that we generated. And so everything that's needed to finish its documentation has been started at this point. And so we've eliminated a lot of possible errors in traceability that might happen because someone recorded a number incorrectly. And it's just as important as anything as you need to have this labels and all your numbers, etc., working so that they can be traced right through. Everything right down to even the seed declaration at the end is pre-labeled. It's waiting for months later when someone's going to grade it and get all the final information. Next slide, please. And again, everything is pre-labeled on the lot number before harvested, and this detailed tracking system is critical to our industry. And I guess if you've been in the business for a while, and you will find out that sooner or later someone will question your quality system, and therefore having an impeccable record keeping will be a good strategy for your insurance, for your peace of mind. I guess one comment here is, like an ounce of protection is always worth a pound of cure. So being proactive on this is good. I guess I'll move on from there. I kind of picked two quick topics to talk about because I know our time would get constrained. The other topic I was going to talk about was to encourage people to continue to invest time in cleaning equipment and stuff. It's a terrible job. No one likes it. I know Barry alluded to it. You get a sunny day and you're going to spend the next so many hours cleaning a combine, and not everybody gets excited about that. So sometimes I like to invest some money into making that job a little easier, a little more feeling like everybody wants to participate in getting it done. So you'll see some of the slide I got in front of you. We've invested in a portable diesel air compressor that moves about 185 cubic feet. And we can blow a lot of material off and clean up combines quite a bit quicker with such an investment. That doesn't say we don't use other things and encourage people to use other types of compressors or leaf blowers, or some use water to wash and flush out equipment so that you can keep these equipment as sanitized as possible. The little picture on the left here is, I can't find anything like it on the internet, so I thought I'd better put it up because maybe it's unique, maybe it's not, but it's called a Venturi vacuum, and it uses a lot of cubic feet per minute of compressed air to create a venturi or a vacuum. And now this compressor that you see on the right not only can push air around, it also becomes a vacuum. And this is quite efficient. It's just made out of air seeder material, leftover air seeder hose, and it is a very efficient way of either vacuuming out drain tanks, headers, bin bottoms. We use it in a lot of places. I guess the next slide. Again, specialty equipment for plot production. Over the years, I've acquired a lot of old machinery that we keep for plots, and some of that's disappearing now, so I have to change my methods of seeding plots and keeping that contamination down. Also, again, how to clean them out. This vacuum I use helps with the drills, etc. The other thing that we have that's maybe a little different out there is I have a portable plot dryer. I have the ability to take a machine out to the combine in the plot, load it up, I can dry it, and I can deliver it to the warehouse. And I know we clean up machinery and then the weather doesn't always participate. So a lot of times our plots come off tough because we have to take them off the time that we've allocated, and we don't have a lot of extra time. So we must go get that crop and that plot off and put it away safely and without any contaminants. So again, by using something that goes out to the field, picks it up, and can dry it and deliver it to a bag or mini bin, we've reduced the handling, we've reduced the chances of contamination, and we've made probably life a lot easier by having some equipment. I've ran through that quite quickly, and hopefully I can help out on the time here so I can open it up for questions.
Hey, Lyndon, it's Roy here. Roy Van Wyk, the
Yep.
other Roy. I just wanted to comment because I think your points here are really, really important because it kind of speaks a bit of a gap in the system, in the work that between what CSGA does and CSI does. When we're working with the RSCs, we can't, as an audit body, we can't prescribe or consult on how people manage their business or manage the traceability, all the pieces that they need to look after. And there is the gap really sits at any that aren't really wholesaling seed, but so they're not accredited necessarily as an AC. So there's no one looking at them from that, through that lens and looking at how they manage their the integrity of the seed they're handling. They might be as a bulk storage facility if they're moving seed in bulk. So there is a bit of a gap, in that documentation. So I think exercise and the traceability work that's done. So I think your presentation was great in helping those people better understand what traceability and what documents can be in place. And we've always looked at the, that's in your quality management system, but the way you handle traceability and all your documentation, for CSI, we have ISO accreditation under ISO 17065, but to us, it's an insurance policy because we constantly looking at our quality management system and improving it and so on. It really mitigates the chances of us, the potential for us for doing something wrong or having an issue. So thank you. I think your presentation was great.
Thank you. Nick has a question here. Do you have any suggestions for software for inventory management? Trackers that we use. Seed Tracker is what we use. There are other systems out there, but I think it's important that still how information comes from the field to the office to who puts it in the seed. That's the link that we kind of went after to make sure that we've identified this crop that becomes seed that sits in a bin and that it gets to the seed tractor. And then from the seed tractor, whoever's in charge, they assign bins and they assign movement. And since it runs off an app on a phone, every transaction's recorded. So we know what day they went into bin 18. We know what day they got into another bin. And that brings a lot in our system around to understanding where things are. And we'll catch some mistakes. We find our memories aren't quite as good as we'd like.
Thanks, Lyndon. My apologies. I had my muted myself and forgot to unmute myself, and I didn't see the questions, so my apologies. Are there any other questions before we move on? All right, I'd like very much to thank Brianna, Alyssa, Barry, Roy, and Lyndon for their presentations this morning. And we are going to finish this first session, Seed Growing 101. And we'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors who are shown on the screen. They're our sponsors for all of our events for this year. Thank you.